Lint,
Colette,
how are you doing?
I am not on fire, so I'm doing great.
Happy Friday. We're recording this on a Friday. We're definitely not releasing it on a Friday.
Yes, I am very glad that it is Friday. I'm ready to get out of LA and not be working.
I am sending you and your neighbors and your friends and your community it's just scary and awful. And also sending so much love and hugs to the first responders. Like, oh my God, just everything that's been going on. And if you're one of our listeners out there, like, just we hope that you've stayed safe and uh yeah,
It's been a rough week.
a moment of appreciation for the helpers, as Mr. Rogers likes to say. Um yeah. So you're not on fire, literally and metaphorically. There are no fires at work right now.
There are no fires, although there's been a lot of smoke.
Ooh.
It's been I've been on call this week,
Mhm.
and it's been one of those weeks where like every incident has turned out to be no big deal, but getting some practice, in and like declaring and looking and um, I much prefer this one to the ones where they're actually. But yeah, it feels really nice to downgrade to Sev 4. Like, oh no, this is like not a problem. Yay. That's happened twice to me this week.
Oh wow, that's great. Good news. I I always wonder. I feel a little bit maybe like I have a wish to be an organizational Cassandra, but like like are there like it's like when like how do you get the spidey sense when you're like, oh, like small thing, small thing, small thing, small thing, small thing, this is going to be bad. And like the next month or two, like the big ones, like the big one's going to hit. Like, do you feel like you can get a sense from that when you're on call?
I do. And January at, I think maybe everywhere, I don't know, but certainly at like places where like you're building tools for people to use at work, like it always kind of builds through January and I can feel it like, oh, this week was a lot of smoke. Next week there might be a little fire. Like,
Yeah.
I hope not. Like, I'd love to just have peace through this, but we'll see. And that spidey sense is something that I encourage everyone who's ever on call to listen to
Mm.
and just declare. Like, we have that joke, is this an incident? The answer is
If you're
always
asking,
yes.
the answer is yes.
Yes.
Uh, yeah, January, if we have any listeners at enterprise companies, do you also find that January is chock full of really weird, massive ones? Like, not just like big incidents or like scale incidents, but also like weird ones, right? Like, where you're like super unanticipated, right? January is a month for resilience, I guess.
I like that. I want that like in very nice handwriting, like on a poster on the wall, like with like lace and flowers, right? January is a month for resilience. It sounds so perfect.
Yeah,
But I just feel like every January, like everybody who's been holding off on that big migration,
hmm
or like trying their new idea, they've got some rest. They're like, let's do it.
It's time.
It's
Unleash the
time.
Kraken. So that maybe could go on a This Is Fine t-shirt. I've been coming up with t-shirt ideas for us. So um also my friend and coworker Dom gave me this one this morning. Dom, if you're out there, thank you. But it's my incident doesn't care about your org chart. Um
Ooh, I like that one.
Good one.
Yeah. We do need to collect these. Send them in.
Yeah, if you have ideas for This Is Fine merch, that we can make for you. Yeah. Like this mug is filled with the tears of a
SREs
Sub-Zero
everywhere.
incident
Yeah,
commander.
I like it.
Um, cool. What else? What else is going on?
Oh my gosh, so much.
We have a really cool guest today.
Definitely. One of my favorite people. I was on her podcast at one time.
Favorite people, I believe also one of the most competent people I know. I just want to we invite, there is to some degree or another, we know socially a lot of the guests on our podcast, right? Some less so than others, but I have to say, like, I have not interacted a ton with Courtney until recently. I became the president of the Resilience and Software Foundation. She's the vice president. And so we've been working together a lot, in particular in the last 4 months as we've spun this up. And just like, I'm blown away by her in all areas of the world. I guess that's a good seg for me to read her bio for everybody. So our guest today is Courtney Nash. Courtney Nash is a researcher focused on system safety and failures in complex socio-technical systems. She created The Void in 2021 to help shine a light on how we can more effectively learn from software incidents. An erstwhile cognitive neuroscientist, she has always been fascinated by how people learn and the ways memory influences how they solve problems. Over the past 2 decades, she's held a variety of editorial, program management, research, and management roles at Holloway, Fastly, O'Reilly Media, Microsoft, and Amazon. Courtney is going to talk with us today about AI. We're very excited. Yes, we're doing an AI episode. It's happening right now.
It had to happen.
It had to happen eventually, everybody. Strap in. All right. Welcome, Courtney. Courtney! We're so excited you're here.
I'm excited to be here.
We were just talking about how exciting it is to have you on our podcast. Thank you for joining us.
I love podcasts, so this is great.
We love your podcast. We are big fans of The Void. We're big fans of you and all the stuff you do.
Same.
I think that I'm trying to think of when I first was introduced to your work. And I think it was, your absolute annihilation of MTTR. And I'm just so grateful that you did the work. I'm just so grateful.
I could say it was absolute, because that means that it would have been done.
But I just sent your InfoQ article to a colleague today.
It is useful.
Asked me about MTTR. So your annihilation, it will just continue forever. So thank you.
You're welcome.
MTTR is more like a virus than a structure that can be annihilated, right?
It's true.
We're
it is
inoculating the world,
yes.
and we have to keep inoculating everyone that mentions it to us. Oh, hang on a second, I've got your vaccine right here.
Thank you.
For those of you who are wondering, you could just Google Courtney Nash MTTR. Also, I'll put that I'll put that in the episode notes as well. We'll just throw a bunch of Courtney content at you in the episode notes. Courtney, you've recently been talking about AI and automation. And so when this question came into my email inbox, I thought of you.
Okay.
I'm going to read the question.
Sure.
What would you say to the boss who thinks AI is magic for resiliency? How about the 30-year-old mid-level engineer who is excited or nervous about their future, or the new grad? How do you give safety to people fearful of the raw power of AI? Who makes the guardrails?
What? So whammy of a question.
That's a lot of questions.
That's like people are like, I have one question. And then I'm like, actually, it's 17 questions. But fair. Because I don't think everybody in that example was even fearful, which is where things get interesting. So, okay.
Should we start with the boss? That was the first one that got mentioned. The boss thinks it's magic for resiliency.
Those are the people I like to talk to. They don't always like to talk to me. But so let me back up a little bit. And maybe this give some context to why you all asked me to come talk about this. Because one of the things I'm trying, the large overarching goal of the Void is to use public incident reports to help us better understand what we think we know about the systems that everybody deals with day in and day out, that all of the folks who listen to this podcast no doubt do. And ideally to bring data to the process, because we have a lot of deeply held beliefs, not all of which come from data. And I have learned that the only way to try to divorce people from those beliefs, maybe that's not the right word, but separate people from those beliefs is with data, even if they came to those beliefs without data, right? So I have looked at MTTR, I've looked at things around root cause, and there was no way of avoiding the elephant in the room of AI, but I thought I'd start someplace closer to what we're all really dealing with and to what actually sort of is much more common in a lot of complex systems, places where SREs hang out a lot, and that's just automation. And I thought, well, I'll go look at what I have in the Void and see what I can find about how automation is involved in all of these incidents. And so along the way, I drag a lot of research into there. And I know that your audience is probably familiar with this. I don't feel like I have to put too much around this. You've had John Allspaw on, you've had other people who like to talk about nerdy research papers. But what the crux of what I like to say to the boss is that automation or AI doesn't just replace the work you think it's replacing. And it actually creates new kinds of work that you are unaware of. And it leads to other outcomes that you did not anticipate when you put that thing in the system, right? And I actually had, this is like the feeling I had at the beginning of MTTR stuff too. I had somebody come to me after I'd posted a talk I gave at SRECon EMEA about exactly this. And he found me on LinkedIn and he said, the thing that clicked for me was it's not a replacement. You're not just swapping machines for humans. You're now, when you do that, you create new modes of work and you create new realities for those people that nobody planned for. He's like, that actually finally clicked in my brain. And I was like, this is magical. It's possible to tell the boss, if you will, because this guy falls into that category, I would say, that you aren't just solving the problem you think you're solving. And you may not even be solving that problem. And you're maybe causing new problems.
And this is so we'll link to this talk in the show notes. This is the one with the vulture that starts out with the vultures and that goes into Haba Maba, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All the acronyms.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Haba Maba, do you want to
Sure. It's Haba Maba is a concept that is the pervasive myth of automation, and we've just packaged it up in fancier, better venture backed terms for AI. It's the same myth, and that is that humans are better at Haba than certain things, and machines are better at certain things. And so the very temptingly simple notion is that you just give the things computers are good at to the computers, if that was a thing, and the things that humans are good at to the humans, right? Or I would say the second layer of that is you give the things humans don't want to do to the computers, right? I think that's the other piece of it that we rarely talk about, like the toil, or just boring, repetitive stuff, like, I don't know, strategy. No, wait, we don't give that to the computers yet. Okay, so that's the Haba Maba. By the way, it used to be Maba Maba, men are better at, machines are better at, but somewhere along the way, we at least figured that one out, hopefully. So, and this comes from a researcher, a psychologist named Fitz. So it's often referred to as, well, the Fitz list is the set of things under those two assumptions, right? So he lists all the things that humans are generally better at and all the things that machines are generally better at, right? And in a Jetsons world, we just give those things to the machines and the other things to the humans, and then we all just get to go do the work that we want to do. But that's not how these systems work, right?
We talked a little bit about this in our last episode with Steve McGee. About how I was like, I'm waiting for the time when everything is done for me and we have universal basic income and I can just go make art all
Make
day.
music.
Like I'm
Yeah,
ready. I'm ready.
sure. Yeah.
Um,
I would
and
be in my garden all day long, y'all. All day. And
but
yet here I am.
and yeah, here we are making podcasts
Yeah.
for the machines. So I think this reminds me too, though, of, and I hate, it's resilience engineering podcast. I get it, folks, but like, I am an anarchist, anarcho-socialist. And so we're bringing that in here right now. There's a guy, his name's David Graeber, and he has a really great talk, if you haven't seen it, called On Bullshit Jobs. I think he made it into a book. And he had a theory, an operational theory in anthropological terms, that uh that like actually the automation did happen to some degree with computers and things in the 60s and 70s, and that now we just have bullshit jobs where people just like make spreadsheets or like do stuff where they're like not really sure actually what, but like they have bullshit jobs, and they're largely, actually ironically, relatively high paying jobs compared to like non-bullshit jobs like teaching children or being nurses or like anything else.
Fighting fires.
Yeah,
Let's throw that one in for
exactly.
context currently.
Relevant context today. And I do like I agree, like I 100% understand the like automation thing, the ironies of automation. That is what we're talking about, right? You automate something, and then suddenly actually there's more work for it, but it's a different kind of work. And it's, there. But I also would like to posit that society weirdly makes up work.
Yes. Yes. We do weirdly make up work. And so, yeah, so I think that's the piece for the boss, right? Is if you're going to do this, and you're already doing it, but be mindful of what that means, and listen to your people when they tell you that now that weird AI thing is in here, here's all the stuff that just no longer makes sense. Or now I'm spending way more time doing this. And it's like, no, I don't suddenly have 20 extra hours in my week to go do whatever extra
bullshit
KPIs
job
we put on. Yeah, whatever bullshit KPIs we have for that. And so I think that's the myth, is not that it will not just replace things, it will make new work. And I think the other piece of that, while we're in this sort of ironies of automation, listen, Bainbridge world, is that the other irony of that is that not only do you put this system in place to try to make things better, but when it goes wrong, right, when it doesn't do what you wanted it to do, because reality, it's actually harder for the people who are supposed to do that to like figure out what the fuck it's actually doing. That's harder than normal day-to-day work were that thing not there. And so the it's particularly maybe an SRE pain point, or a person, it's the people who deal with it when it goes wrong. And so that's that. Who are the two other people? I've already forgotten the 17 other parts of this question.
Oh, sorry. So the 30-year-old mid-level engineer who is excited or nervous about their future.
Oh God.
Who just learned Kubernetes.
Kubernetes. Like, should we just start there?
Right. I feel like if you had just, like, if you asked our listeners, like, what is Courtney on about? Like, I think we get 90% answer rate of like, oh yeah, Kubernetes, bullshit job. like we created this thing, and I, by the way, love what Kubernetes can, it promises. Like, I want this automation magic. Sure. Like, we're going to deploy more stuff, and we're not going to have to deal with all this bullshit of the VMs, because the VMs help us not deal with the bullshit of the computers, and the computers help us not deal with the bullshit of some stuff. Yeah. Point being, like, this is a very real experience for SREs, and we go through it on like a 3 or 4 year cycle. And AI is now the impending. I'm not a 30-year-old, but I am this mid-level engineer. Is like, oh boy, what's
Clint,
this?
You're not a mid-level engineer.
Oh, fine. Yeah, right. I'm a staff engineer, and I'm sitting here going, AI. Like, I feel this impending. I want to talk about this a little bit, not just the impending worry about what new bullshit it's going to bring into my world that I'm going to have to learn to deal with that now, but there's also this pressure to be good at it because it's the thing now. Even if you're like, this is just another one, you still have to do it.
I haven't really thought about that angle of it, to be perfectly honest.
It was
Um,
interesting when I want to say when Copilot first came out, when like a lot of the LLM stuff really started hitting the market. I remember asking a very talented DBRE that I was working with. I was like, "Are you using what?" This is like kind of before it was okay. Like this is before GitHub had like enterprise accounts, right? Like for it. So this
yeah.
is before people were admitting to using it at a company level. And I was like, "Are you using it? Like, how are you using it? I'm just curious, just want to know, understand." And he said, honestly, the docs for like all of our cloud providers are so shitty to traverse that like I'm really using it for that. Like I'm using it for docs because like it takes me so much time to find stuff that like but if I use an LLM like it will get me to the right page and like I
So
can
they're
just find
using
the information I need.
so they're using Copilot as like Chat GPT for
Well,
technical
they were
docs.
using ChatGPT for docs, so they were to
Yeah,
traverse.
yeah.
But so he didn't talk so as much about using Copilot. I don't think he was as interested in that at the time. And so I really think about that as like, oh, like yeah, that makes sense. Like huge repositories of knowledge. I need to find an answer
Yeah.
quickly about a particular thing. Obviously, I'm gonna go to an LLM to like help me get the answer because I don't have time to sort through the table of contents or rely on the search
Well,
Amazon's
I
wonderful
mean,
search.
how many articles have I seen lately that are like, is AI replacing Stack Overflow? And I'm like, is this what we're fucking worried about right now?
Oh no.
I mean, Stack Overflow is, but
That's the only person. Or people. Sorry, no offense, Stack Overflow folks. I'm actually sure that's kind of worrisome.
they're
But
really awesome.
yeah. So here's the
Shout out
thing.
Stack Overflow people.
Yes. That was. I did not mean to sound so dismissive. So middle of your career kind of person, and the thing that I always that well, so first of all, the snarky thing I think about of and the person who's in this world is like, um, what's the AI version of you build it, you maintain it, right? Like, where's
Uh,
Werner? Where's Werner on this one? Like if the AI builds the code, what
well,
are
and
they?
that I mean,
Eventually, they're going to run the pager, though, right? This is what we're promised. This is what we're promised. Is
well,
they're
lots
going
of
to,
people are offering
right?
that as a product right now,
Of course they
which
are. You first, I believe, is what somebody else I know
yeah,
said.
Will Gallego said today on LinkedIn. When everybody tells me that AI can be on call, I'm like, cool, you first, you go first. Let me know how
So
that
I don't know
goes.
how that goes. Yeah.
yeah, I think the person who's excited but nervous, I don't know what I'm sure I think I understand what they're excited about, right? Like the promise of you can write code faster, less toil, like it'll help you, all that stuff. Probably what they're excited about. I don't know if I don't know if they're nervous about replacing their job or if they're nervous about what happens when things go wrong. So I'm going to
Mm.
speak more to the sort of middle ground of that, I guess. But one of the things I talk about, people always say, okay, now what? Like if you're saying I'm not, and I get accused of being anti-automation, right? Which I'm not. I'm not. It makes my life a lot better in a lot of ways, right? But I feel like I'm also very open-eyed about it. But I end up talking about a lot of really nerdy academic research around joint cognitive systems, right? But to put that into like terms that make sense to a 30-year-old mid-career engineer, the way I want people to think about this and the way I want people designing these tools and all of this stuff is to, so let's put Haba Maba out the window and let's put we need a term for this, y'all. We need like an acronym for doing things together, so that the systems help you do your job, right? Collaboratively, like they're like Jarvis in freaking Iron Man, right? Like not replacing the work you do, but just making it so much more awesome, right? And so I suppose for the fear part of it, or if I were that person in that role, or like AI is being just put into my team or onto my job, would be to ask questions around how do we fit this in a way that helps us? Can we make those? Can I choose, if hopefully, sometimes if you're a 30-year-old mid-career engineer, you don't have a lot of control over that. But the things I would ask for and advocate for would be the ability to have a say over how that stuff is integrated into your work, especially if you can't just make it go away if you want to. And if you're excited about it, to be thinking about it that way instead, right? And so jointly working with this to make the work you do maybe less of a bullshit job. I don't know. So I don't know what other thoughts you all have for those folks.
I read
That's
something.
not it's a non-answer. I'm sorry. I
eh,
apologize.
I
But
read something
Question with a
today that
question. I like it.
I read something
no.
today that was like, and maybe this is about where things are at now and that will get better or whatever. But like somebody said that, you know, actually the only people who can use Copilot effectively, like, or any code creation, sorry, I shouldn't tarnish Copilot or lift them up as any code creation AI, device. The people who can do that the most effectively are the senior engineers, because when it inevitably fucks up or puts something in that isn't right, or the only people who can really read it to comprehend it enough are more senior, like mid to senior to, whatever engineers, people who are very junior, people who are trying to teach themselves how to code.
Yeah.
It's actually very hard for them to use coding tools to do that, because when they break or they have edge bug cases or whatever, it takes days and weeks to debug because they don't actually understand how it works.
Yeah.
Whereas people who are building it with the knowledge of like basic code structures and, how to debug something have a much easier time, rolling in and fixing up the edge cases or whatever.
Yeah.
I've also read a lot about how people like it for writing unit tests, like the boring shit that nobody likes to do, right?
Oh man, but I think that's great, right? And it's also that it's not replacing unit tests, right? Or like it's like that's not a replacement, that's an augmentation. That's like helping you do something. And I think that's the right mentality. I think the other little irony that you brought up, which is a really good one, is the thing about putting a lot of AI into systems or a lot of automation into systems is that then oftentimes, like you said, like people who don't have as much exposure to those systems, right? You rotate through on call or whatever, it's even worse. They just don't, because the things over here doing all this stuff, you only gain experience and expertise with a system by interacting with it, by doing that. And so now you're 1 or 2 degrees removed from that, and then you're going to have to try to solve that problem. And so I think you're right, although I would argue even experienced engineers, if you could also be dropped into a situation where something with this is kind of like the tech debt or legacy code problem writ large, where now you've got who wrote the AI?
Right.
Is she still there?
Yeah.
When it breaks? Like, how do you know what it's actually supposed to be doing? Or so there's that piece of it as well. I think that like even a more experienced person might run into that, because then they're not having that direct contact with the system anymore.
This happens like back up from AI, right? With your automation.
Yeah.
Like I saw a very big shift a few years ago while interviewing more junior candidates. We had to stop talking about tools like SSH. So SSH was like what all of us first learned to make a network computer on the internet in the 90s, right? Like, and it was a revolution then. And by 2015 or so, it started to not be a thing you should be using, right? And because those of us who came up through that, those old grizzled graybeard veterans had used SSH, we can still see the remnants of it in the new systems. And so when those pieces break, we're like, I know how that works. Like the signals and the Unix POSIX standards and all these esoteric things that you don't need to know anymore to get pretty far. But you get to that mid-level, and suddenly, without those first principles having been built that way, you are at a huge disadvantage to those senior engineers. And this is what I worry about with AI. You can go through a lot of that learning without talking to those senior engineers, and you'll get it 90% right, but that 10% is really, really important, and and the senior engineers won't know to tell you because they haven't been through it with you, and they won't know what you do and don't know. And I haven't seen this yet, but this is how I feel, is like I've trained enough junior engineers and made them awesome mid-level engineers to know we're not doing that with Copilot. It's just stuff's like showing up, like the Terraform's showing up written. And it's like, how did you get there? I don't know. Like I think it's right. It compiles.
Yeah.
So that like loss of the process of building blocks, I think that's part of all adoption of automation, but it feels like AI does it to a
Faster.
to
Yeah.
a higher cognitive level
Yeah, it's not just
than
that it's
like other
faster.
pieces did.
It's because of the nature of it, the ability to kind of piece things together. Um, in a like automation, you're still saying, I want you to do this and I want you to do that, and like, and obviously we know then that goes awry when other pieces of the system interact with it. But the thing still is supposed to just sit there and do this, right? But AI, you can get stuff to piggyback build on it in a way that you definitely can't with automation. And so I do think it's not just the speed, it's actually the nature of what gets built is different and can be much more difficult to, again, like introspect and
Unpack. Yeah.
unpack. Yeah. And so again, yes, when it goes wrong, there be dragons.
It's hard to even know when it's wrong. That's
This
crazy.
this reminds me of
yes.
like, mainframe computers with assembly, and like there aren't that many people who write it, like they make millions of dollars, right? Like, or whatever, like doing like COBOL and stuff now. Like it's
Yeah.
just like is that gonna be like the future for all code in 10 years if we're right? Like, I don't want to put timeframes on it, right? But
Yeah.
if we start down this path, right, like the people who actually understand it and can debug it when you are having a site-wide outage and you don't have any senior
Yeah.
engineers who understand it suddenly can charge you $1 million a day, like because otherwise you're screwed.
Yeah, and well, and I think the other piece of that of what was coming to my brain while you were saying that, just that I think the other, yeah, that just to put a pin in what you were saying, Clint, and what you're saying there is we haven't just taken all of our systems whole scale and just completely swapped them out into this new thing. It's all just like layer caked, on top of the same shit that's always been there. It's not gone, right? And so, I mean, like part of my brain, whenever I say like layer cake, it's like an avalanche model, right? In the sense of like you're building all this stuff and it looks beautiful and powdery and you want to all go like do that. And then underneath is absolute terror and danger. And only the people who've ever had experience with that know, how bad that is. And so
Docker still uses TTYs. TTY, teletype terminal. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's pseudo TTYs, but yeah, like to your point, like it's all built on top, and the layers are starting to disappear, but they're just being hidden. They're obscured by the complexity of the new thing.
That's an illusion.
Yeah,
very much.
It is
so.
an illusion, very much. Who was our third person?
How do you give new grad? So new grad.
Well, we were already kind of getting into this.
Yeah. How do you give safety to people fearful of the raw power of AI? Who makes the guardrails?
Oh, guardrails is that's a loaded term in the safety science world. I don't know if we want to go into that, or who makes the guardrails is another doozy of a question. I feel like I have to separate those two. So, because they're related but not related. I mean, they're related. New grad. So we've kind of hit on this, right? Like you're going to get dropped in, and you at this point, if you are a new grad, have probably had a lot of your initial exposure to writing code with automated tools. How do you give them safety?
To people who are fearful, I think is the question.
See, that's what I'm saying. These questions each have like 7 questions.
With new grads, I mean, here's what my advice to anybody is like, yes, learn how to build with Copilot. Yes, learn how to do the best query generated code, like experiment with it, do all of it. Also build from scratch. Also like deeply introspect, also read void incident reports, like understand how things are breaking now so that you can look and intuit, and the kinds of intuitions that people who build systems without the assistance of Copilot, the kinds of intuition that they have about being able to troubleshoot, and it's just different. And if you can garner some of that intuition, you will find yourself, I think, to be very valuable when you are employed somewhere.
This makes me think of, I think it was, and God, I hope I don't butcher his name. I feel like I do every time I say it. Gergely Oraz?
Yeah.
The Pragmatic Engineer, his newsletter. I think I just saw, I'll have to go look it up maybe so you all can post to it later. because he had a really nice little thread, I think it was on Blue Sky, about like what is it like to become a very seemingly quickly scaled beginner engineer versus the person who starts going down, not necessarily rabbit holes, but deep dives. And, I will find it. It was really fascinating because it was exactly what you're talking about here about how you can very quickly seem to be 90%, correct or capable, but you're missing that ability to build that deep intuition about systems that will ultimately, at least in the near term, let's say, again, I'm not putting any timeframes on this, at least in that person's early career, will put a hamper or will hamper their career growth, I actually think, right? Like you will rocket start up to like very immediately valuable, successful beginner, junior engineer, and you will be able to solve lots of all these little, but the second you have to get into that like weird shit domain, you don't have any of the skills to do that. And so I think, for the newer people, I think that's exactly the right advice. I think the scarier part of that question is who makes the guardrails. So to just safety science nerd out just a little bit, the very notion of guardrails is sort of antithetical to creating safety. And maybe we could find a good paper for people because I doubt we have enough time to talk about all the nuance of that. Our intuition as humans and our notion of physical safety, right, is to have guardrails so that you don't like drive off the freeway or, whatever. But in the terms of these kinds of complex systems, guardrails don't always achieve what we want them to achieve. And so the notion of guardrails for AI, I think it's fraught on multiple levels. I think it's fraught on that nerdy, sort of safety science domain. I think it's also fraught in the sense of it's certainly not the people building the tools. The last thing they want is guardrails on those things. It's probably not the man and the boss who's excited about this stuff. And so I think it is the people who that mid-level, maybe management of engineering teams, engineering manager folks. I wouldn't encourage them to build guardrails, but I would encourage them to build joint systems, to build awareness, to build the ability for people to express how this interaction with these systems is impacting the work they do. I want them to build psychological safety on their teams, not guardrails. That would be, and I would argue the people I suppose who are the most uniquely situated to do that are the ones who are trying to put those tools into their teams.
This is an interesting. So I'm learning about this part of safety science right now, because I use guardrails as a term. But I see your point, and I recently was doing some writing about holding it wrong. That's a term you'll hear a lot in the software world right now. Oh,
I don't know this one.
The user's just holding it wrong.
To me. Oh,
right.
Is this like a polite way of saying user error?
Yes. Okay. And I've been pointing out that this isn't compatible with human error. Resilience wants us to say, no, they're holding it the way it makes sense at the time.
Right. Yes. Right. And the way the system allows them to.
And probably. You need to listen to them and ask them, well, why did you hold it that way? Like, what made you think that made sense?
What made sense about that at the time?
And exactly.
Best question ever.
That is the best question, right? That is the one I keep just hammering in. But in the same sense, if we make AI like arms out, you can't actually hold it and we try to prevent that, we will either not have AI, we'll have like guardrails that we use to talk to AI, right? Or we'll have people at a disadvantage because they don't, some will have guardrails and some won't. But either way, what I guess what I'm getting at is, I think what we're worried about is that companies will hold it wrong.
Yes, 100%.
And companies that we rely on for things like bank accounts and
right. And so, like, I'm imagining a scenario where a Chat GPT or a Copilot or somebody's selling a product to a bank or a consequential organization and is saying, as long as you hold it right, it'll be great. Right? Yeah. Instead of designing the system thinking, well, let's see how they hold it. and then we'll see where how many of the foot guns they find. Uh,
Yes.
right. And let's
I,
not put it in consequential. And like you said, you first. That's what I
yeah.
think you're getting at with like not guardrails, but like more like collaborative design and actually building.
Eyes wide open.
Yeah. So tell me more
Collaborative
about that.
design.
Like,
Um,
that's what I want to know.
yeah, well, I mean, I guess in some ways, the way I think about this AI in this context is no different than anything else. Like, don't roll out a shitty product for your customers that makes them have to do dumb stuff to like get, right? Or don't require your engineers to have 6 people on code review, or like, I don't know, I'm trying to make up examples, right? But anything that you add to the way people work, um, care about what it does to the way they work. Like, I feel like that's such a fundamental thing that we don't do about so many things, right? We don't do it about expense reporting systems. We don't do it about like, and it is still that lack of, honestly, it's one of these things where you're like, for so long we had user experience designers, right, for front end experience. We still do. And we've never really been good about that for internal tooling, dev tooling, that kind of thing. And secretly, I always think that I want companies to have like experience design experts, right? Cognitive science people who actually understand that stuff. And it's a whole different job and a different way of doing things. It's not to say that people in the tech world can't do that or can't care about that, but they don't tend to do at least the latter of those things. And so it's the intentional addition of this thing to your workforce. How are you going to do that? So I don't think it's any different than that. I just think we're just as shitty at that as we are at everything else. But this has, again, these broader, potentially speedier consequences.
Yeah.
And so that's the scary part, right?
Yeah.
That's like,
This
now I have a
reminds
car
me,
that can go 120 miles an hour. And,
yeah. This reminds
Yeah.
me of Dave Woods just saying like, all this stuff, we went through it in the 80s already. Like, I do think that there is, especially the people doing joint cognitive systems, like the people who are expert at this, the people who work with like the military and like, pilots and stuff constantly
Yeah.
on joint cognitive systems. This is like not their first rodeo.
No.
I wonder if we're going to have more jobs available for joint cognitive systems experts in software, because
I mean, God, I hope so.
Right.
I mean, obviously, I come from a cognitive science back, like that was my world for a long time, and so I'm obviously deeply biased, but I think I'm, deeply biased in the right way. Uh, but like in these domains where you might kill people, it turns out they started taking it seriously.
Yeah.
And we could all sit around and have 4 hours of conversation about how much and to what extent and when or whether software kills people, but we know it has. And we know at points it will. And then now we're really talking about adding something to that exacerbates the scope of that possibility. And so I fear, though, that we will have to reach a pretty painful point as an industry to do that, right? So I don't know I feel like we've already reached the equivalent of planes falling out of the sky, but people just aren't paying attention. So this has gotten a very dark turn. I apologize. But
No, like think about how a CDN, which doesn't seem like a safety critical system, goes down, and suddenly hospitals are having trouble, right?
Well,
Airports are
that
having
has
trouble. Like that's already happened.
yes.
And
Yeah.
if we aren't paying attention yet, I think we are.
That's what I'm saying.
Obviously,
I think we
what's
have had the place
motivating
falling
us.
out of the skies.
But like our management layers are just starting to hear these stories from us, and they're starting to hear about AI, and I can empathize with them that they're thinking like maybe the AI is the answer to this, and we know
For
that
sure. It's going to do it
depends.
better. It's going to do
Right.
it better is what I hear all the time. And people actually also, here's where I always end out with this is my talks also sound a little sad and, like automation and all the bad things. And people ask me, well, like, what if we have AI? Won't it, does AI promise to fix all of these things? And my argument every time is it only will if all of these principles of joint cognitive systems are included in that. If we do that, maybe, right? But if we just take the same thing we've been doing and just, pile a Chrysler on top of the potato chips on top of the blah de blah, and then like make it go twice as fast. No, it will not actually be better and solve those problems. So that's the answer that I always have is, and then like this is the plea to the AI developers, to the AI tool makers, to the commercial AI tool makers, to the internal to your company weird glue work, strange shit that you don't know how it works AI developers, is to pay attention to that stuff. You are building such a potentially impactful, you know this already, but if you could take the time to add some learning about this other domain that clearly exists, that has for a long time, that has helped other very safety critical industries, you actually stand a chance to make something that will deliver on some of your promises and not blow up in your faces and everyone else's faces. That is my plea to all the AI people.
I have a secondary plea, which is to the managers, right? Maybe I'm selfish in thinking about folks in my position, right? Like
You are not.
we are often
Well, I mean, you are, but rightfully so.
We are often given Copilot as a, now you shall have code generation tools. Now you shall have access to LLMs. For those who are skeptical but want to do the right thing here, who have intuition or suspicion that this could go wrong, my suggestion is to take a bunch of people who are going to be working with these tools, whether you like it or not, and they are going to do it whether you like it or whether it's sanctioned or not, just so you know, and to take them through an exercise, which is, what are the signals that we would get if this is successful? What are the signals we would get if this was less successful? What are signals that we would get that maybe we would want to say, let's take a break from Copilot for a couple months and see if things get a little bit better around these particular areas, right? It's okay to have a set of metrics or vibes or qualitative happenings that you predict or not, and to keep an eye on them. It's okay to use your intuition to decide that, collectively you're going to walk something back or reconsider it or learn about it. And I also think it's okay to lean into the people who are becoming expert at using it and ask them how they're doing that, right? So everyone else can learn at the same pace as folks in your org. The experts in these tools will be hugely important to navigating the future with them.
I would wonder if at that organization they A/B test things. Do they? Does your organization A/B test things? I don't know. Because it seems like if you're going to A/B test something before you release it, or to see if it's working well, or which version works better, like, I don't know.
But I think this comes back to, I wish that every single infrastructure org in the software world assigned a product manager to every single team and assigned a UX designer to cover a few teams at a time in their infrastructure org. But let me tell you, I think I can count on one hand the number of software organizations that do that. Everybody focuses their product management and UX work on the customer facing stuff and not on internal tooling. And I think the same thing is thought about, right? It's like there's not the same consideration, I think, given. And that leads to this behavior of like, just roll it out. Like, what are you going to do?
Yes.
We wouldn't do that to our customers, would we? Oh,
no.
Well, are we our customers?
It's a known thing, by the way, that staff engineers are product managers for internal tools.
Yes.
In many
and engineering managers. Yeah.
And that is such a broken incentive model, because one of the things that I love my product managers for is that they are supposed to pull in the other direction, because I want to pull in the cool tool direction. I want to pull in
It's
the technological advancement direction, and that's
it's not
not
also
always what the
yes.
users need.
It's not just that though. And I mean, I don't want to come across as some sort of like specialization wonk. Like only people who've gone to grad school for, this can do it. But I am arguing that they are not the same fucking job.
No.
And so either somehow you're going to support, I mean, all engineering managers do wait 7 jobs. Great. Okay. I can't solve that problem. But you are asking somebody who has, I mean, it's like, hey, you've been a really good engineer. Now just be a manager. Zero training, right? It's
Yeah.
essentially the exact same thing. And it's like, now I want you to go do this other job that's literally very different than the one you normally do and you're very good at, but also be just as good at that one. But we're not going to
Mhm.
acknowledge that's what you're doing. And you are going to suffer when it doesn't go well, but that's not going to be at all like
And
reflected
you're
in
probably not going to
anything.
get promoted for it. Yeah.
No,
No.
absolutely not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're going to get
But if
promoted
you,
for doing the
yeah,
cool technological advancement
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
And sorry, users, I'm a bad product manager because I'm a
yeah,
staff engineer and I shouldn't be doing this job. Yes.
yes.
I'm
So
glad we
here,
diverged into this because I think it actually plays really well into all the questions in that,
yeah,
like, can we make sure that when we do eliminate a job with an AI, or what I would say is actually change a job with an AI, that we're really clear about
yeah,
that too. Like that's another thing, a plea I would have for organizations is as you watch this naturally evolve and roll out, that you don't just give up on what that job was doing and say, well, the AI kind of takes care of it now, but actually, really acknowledge like the value that those people are adding and will continue to add and may have a different experience now. Because
yeah.
that's what I'm seeing with the developers too, is it's just a subtle change right now, but it will be more and more and more. This job will change, and the orgs will change much slower than the experience of the people in it.
As
And
is
that
always
is
the
that
case.
is the
Yeah.
thing that I see go wrong more often than not. Is just that your experience has been different for years before there's actually a company program that promotes you for it.
Yeah, I had to change. I changed the way I gave that. I've given that talk 3 times now. I gave it at a talk before I gave it at SRECon, and then I gave it at QCon. And at the first one that I was at, Go to, in Copenhagen, I got a lot of really skeptical questions, and I was like, didn't you use AI to make this presentation? I was like, okay, here's the deal. I'm not, the way I like to close this topic a lot is I'm not anti-automation. I'm not anti-AI. I'm just a little more pro people. Like, can we just be a little more pro people in the way that we think about this? Can we
Well,
care
and I would
about the way
argue
they work?
you're pro AI, you're just pro getting it right. And
Yes.
and I think that in a true resilience engineering fashion, what you're saying is that people are going to be the reason that we get AI right.
Oh man, that sounds like a good one to end on, Colette.
All right. Well, Courtney, I just can't thank you enough. We'll link to all the talks, all the papers. We just threw a bunch of stuff at everybody in our audience, but I hope it provided some good fodder. Thank you to our dear reader for writing in that lovely question. Remember, Clint and I hang out because you write us questions. And if you don't write us questions, friends, we'll hang out still, but we probably won't
Okay,
record
good.
it for your benefit. So if you want us to still do that, you should write us questions. You can write us a question at thisisfine.softwarepodcast@gmail.com, or you can find us at thisisfinepod.com. You can listen to us anywhere. We're starting to look at our analytics on podcasts, and we're super grateful for all of our listeners, all of our comments. If you like our podcast, comment on it, like it. I guess we're going to start saying that stuff now because
Is it
Like
like,
and
share, and subscribe?
we like doing this stuff. So we're really excited if you like it back. So,
And just personally, I would like them to keep doing it, y'all. So, just selfishly.
all right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you both.
We'll see you soon.